to the second issue, which is electoral justice and related matters. As I was walking in, there were questions with respect to the authenticity of figures that have been made in claims and counterclaims. And I remember that the DCI, on its own motion, initiated investigations into the authenticity of figures that were being shared around. I think it is within the powers of this National Dialogue Committee to summon the DCI and ask him how far he has gone with those investigations. As a state officer, he must be held to account. He wrote to the chief officer of the election management body, and I think he owes it to Kenyans to tell us why he stopped or why he has slowed down or how far he has gone, because there could be a possibility that he was told to stop. Is it because it would require opening of servers to ascertain the veracity of those figures? And it would be important for this committee to want to know how the DCI spend public resources on that. Because as a civil society organization, and more so as one who has observed elections in 28 countries in Africa, for the African Union, I want to believe, and it is provided for in the Constitution, that elections be audited, unless there is anybody who knows something that the rest of us do not know. Secondly, there's been an argument based on frustrations by a number of Kenyans as to whether Kenya's election management body should be temporary or permanent. It is the view of the Civil Society Reference Group and the Kenya National Civil Society Center that looking at the heavy tasks that fall within the purview of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, that we can only have a permanent election management body for this country. In any case, co-chairs, it is significant to also outline the fact that some of our elected members have not been lucky enough to serve out their full terms, have been unfortunate to lose their lives either through accidents or ill health, and time and again the election management body is called upon to conduct by-elections to fill in those constituents. So we root for a permanent election management body. Secondly, with respect to the election management body and restructuring, we think that the current manner in which the incumbent president, the overbearing role that the president plays in the appointment of the different bodies that are responsible for the appointment of the panel, gives the incumbent an overbearing role and influence in the constitution of the commission. And we therefore call on this commission to call for the immediate disbandment of the current panel as currently constituted. Because if you look at all those commissions, whether it's the Public Service Commission, the different commissions that appoint the panelists, all of them have their leaderships appointed by the sitting president. And you can therefore not, turn a blind eye to the fact that, the current mechanism where a panel was established on the basis of, being appointed by commissions that are themselves appointed by the sitting president, gives an incumbent who in most cases is also a candidate in presidential elections, an overbearing role, and that needs to be structured. We think that as a country, whereas the IBC is crafted as independent, the current IBC is only independent in name. The reality is that the IBC is controlled and manipulated and has lent itself to manipulation by the powers that be. And if you are in doubt, all you need to read is Isaac Hassan's book, where he narrates how he went out of his way. And he has the audacity to document that in his memoir, how he went about looking for people who could serve as CEO of the election management body, how he tapped certain people. Yet, publicly he advertised the position. Many Kenyans applied thinking that, IBC is an equal and opportunity employer. Yet, in Isaac's own book, he documents how, you know.
So, but I think your time is really running out.
I know.
So go to the issue.
Yeah, so I'm saying that whereas the intention of those of us, and Honorable Marina, you remember how we co-chaired the Technical Committee on Citizenship and the Bill of Rights here at the Bomas of Kenya in 2003 and 2004. We think that Kenya does not, at the moment, is not ready for the kind of commission that we have. We are therefore calling for a mixed model. And in a mixed model, there are basically three types of electoral commissions. There's the independent model, the mixed model, and the government model. What we have in the current constitution that purports to be an independent model is actually a government model. And I've already illustrated how the current law that the president assented to earlier in this year gives the incumbent sweeping powers to influence who becomes the commissioner. As a matter of fact, I can tell you some of the people that would have been commissioners had this process gone on. We know them, and we know who called them to apply. And that is normally what happens with all constitutional commissions. And so we are calling for a mixed model where key political actors play a role. Pundits of the 2022 elections have sought to advance the view that the last elections were the fairest, the freest, and most credible. I can tell you without fear of contradiction that having been an election observer in 28 African countries, the 2002, in my view, remains in Kenya's memory as the most free and fair elections. And there was a formula to that, because the political parties had a say in who constituted the commission then. It is my submission, therefore, that we revert to that model until such a time when our institutions, including constitutional commissions, would be strong enough, because as a country, we must admit that we have not been able to identify people with strong characters can withstand the pressures that come from those wielding state power. And I've already given you the example where Isaac Hassan, in his book,
I think now we'll go to questions.
Mentions that.
We'll go to questions.
Lastly, Chair, seem to be pro-government, people are at liberty to protest. In regions that are perceived to be anti-government, people are not even allowed to step out of their homes and are actually killed and maimed in their humble abodes. We are saying that this committee has a duty to recognize that because we are in this process because of recent protests, that we must not just read about the right to protest in Article 37, but must amend the Public Order Act, and specifically Section 5, that says there shall be no public protest except in accordance with this law. Yet, that is a law that was passed way back by the colonialists to restrain us from removing them from our own country. I do not think that that law is relevant,
Suba.
And I think that we need to. Lastly, the very last Chair.
I think, Chair.
Suba, you're putting me in a tight
I think,
spot.
Chair.
Now you must stop.
Chair.
I understand, and we have been patient. I was to appear before you at 2. So reciprocate my patience also, Chair. With the
30 seconds, Suba. 30 seconds. 30 seconds, and I'm looking at my watch.
Exactly. I would have failed in my responsibility and appearance here if I did not raise the attention of the committee to a law that was passed by the 12th Parliament and assented to by the late Mwai Kibaki, the fourth president of this republic, the third. On 13th of February 2013, that law is called the Public Benefits Organizations Act and was meant to repeal the NGO Coordination Act. For the entire period that Jubilee, that a number of you are part of, was in power for 10 years, they sat on that law, claiming that it is the civil society that took them to The Hague. The Kenya Kwanza administration, in its manifesto, promised to implement the Public Benefit Organizations Act. It is more than a year since Kenya Kwanza came to power. That law has not been implemented. The NGO sector tracks to this economy 180 billion in the last financial year, more than this Kenya's gold that we see on TV. Tea and coffee combined, add even maua and so on from Naivasha. It doesn't compare. So we are calling on this committee to pick up this issue and remind the Kenya Kwanza administration that a promise is a debt, and it must be paid.
Thank you, Suba. Yes, Senator.
Thank you. I want to thank the presenter. I have a question for him, one or two. He, speaking to the issue, Suba, of the various models for appointing IBC commissioners. You say there is a government model, the independent, and a mixture of the two. It is your argument then that the current model, according to you, and I don't agree with you, is a government model. But then I want to say, if it is a government model, then it must be a very good model, because if a government model can result in the loss of an election by the government of the day, then isn't it such a good model? Because what else will you be looking for other than a commission that, according to you, is appointed by government of the day, but still goes ahead to conduct an election where that government loses? Isn't that what we are looking for? Second and last question to him, Chairperson. I have listened to you on the issue of demonstrations. Perhaps you will help us, because there are two contestations. When you listen to people that speak like you, either on your side or from the side of our colleagues across the table, on the right to picket and demonstrate, they feel as if it is a right that is absolute with no limitation, despite the fact that in going about your duties or your demonstration and picketing, sometimes you interfere with the rights of other Kenyans. What is the nexus, or at what point should government seek to interfere so as to ensure that as you go about your rights, you don't interfere with the rights of other Kenyans? Because you have pointed out and said that there are certain regions where demonstrations are allowed. And I'll point to you a simple example. When the Nyamakima traders wanted to present a petition to Parliament earlier on this year, I saw them. Where I sit in my office is on the first floor Parliament building. And they came, made all the noise that they could, and were allowed to present that petition. Later on, when there have been subsequent demonstration, there have been confrontation. And when you ask, why is it the case? He says, for example, the demonstrators that are being interfered with are stopping about those who want to go about their duties. If there's a car and they have blocked the road, they don't allow them to drive. They pickpocket other people. Therefore, what mechanisms have other jurisdictions, as you've said, you're a well-traveled man, have they put in place to ensure that citizens of those countries enjoy these rights and they live freely together? Those who want to picket, those who don't want, they mix so that you have a beautiful country, because that's the picture that you want to paint for us. It will be good to hear from you on that.
And perhaps even as he continues, you've said that you've monitored elections in many African countries. Actually, you mentioned 28 of them. In the case of Kenya, and this was mentioned earlier by Felix, that between 1992 to 2022, the only time there were no issues after elections was 2002. Do you see a constant political factor in all those elections, and what do you deduce out of it?
No.
Constant election factor, political factor in all those elections, and only one was peaceful, free, and fair. Is it possible that elections are only free and fair when a particular person wins?
Oh, it's not on the ballot. And then just to to advance that, what particularly Senator Cheriot said, listening to some of the presentations made, especially those that appear to be casting aspersions on the victory of Kenya Kwanza, including the just concluded presentations from part of our coalition adversaries. A government that is probably one of the strongest units in our history, of a sitting president and one of the senior-most opposition leader in the country, is beaten in every aspect, from tallying to collection of results, to declaration, to monitoring, to every aspect, then I can tell you without a doubt that election is either foolproof or that government was too whatever. Number two, to Kemunto, I used to have a lot of contempt for politicians when I was in the civil society. So much contempt until the day I ran for an election. It is so hard to get elected. These people face unforetold perils in the search for those votes. Nyoro is just right there behind you. He will tell you how hard it is to get elected. I myself am testimony, especially if you are running in a place which is not a stronghold. They are members of parliament for whatever they are worth. They represent us in parliament. They have spoken to these bills and made them law. At what point are the citizens heard? Because I think these are institutions of government that work side by side. There are processes that are put together. So why would you think that that MP, even in the minority, we could just say that these are majoritarian, and therefore all of us now go for demonstrations. We don't accept these taxes. To hell with all the institutions that we created.
Suba?